Hello and welcome back to the Big O podcast. I am so excited to be starting season 2 with you today. And we have got the most amazing guest to kick us off today. We have Starling. Now, she is, a British pop princess and an international speaker on self-belief. And her message is all about that. And I absolutely love it. Her music is beautiful. So hello, Starling, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Emma. I'm a fan of your work and everything that you share. And it's so important to talk about pleasure and women putting themselves first, which is in a way aligned, actually in a big way, aligned with what I do through my music, but also what I do through my talks and my programs. Shall I introduce myself?
Yes, please. Tell
I feel
us
like this is
about
the moment.
you. This is the
Yeah,
moment.
this is the moment to do it. So my name is Starling, or Starling's World on Instagram, Spotify, all of those places. And I'm a pop singer. I write music. I write my own music. I release it, and I tour the world with it. I think the key thing about my music is how mission led it is, or how full of messages it is, or hopefully it is. That's the feedback, which is about risk and is about commitment to what it is that you really want for yourself. But also the reality of that journey can be quite testing. So I talk about, not just like going for it and encouraging people to believe in their enoughness and in their vision, but also just the reality that we get tested. Oh, for sure. It can be quite the ride. And then when we look at my programs or my talks that have sort of gone international at this point, New York, LA, started out in London, just literally in the last year, what I'm really talking about, which would like to, I'm sure, touch on, but the workshops go deeper, is that icon energy. So how can we really have self-commitment, self-connection, and self-belief to really hold our own, really, but also go for what we want. And I'm very much led by death. Death that actually I won't be here forever, you won't be here forever, we won't be here forever. And in a way, to me, that's actually a positive rather than the doom of that. And if we've not got much time, and we know that this is a very precious life, how can you make your life one that you really enjoy, but also that really is connected to what you want to be known for, and what's your impact? What do you want to kind of do for others as well as for yourself? I talk a lot about icon energy, which I'd love to touch on today. And I also have a program for musicians, the only program in the world run by a recording artist. So it's all the secrets of the industry as well as the how-tos, and a wealth program for women. I've really noticed how frequently women have historically, but also currently, struggled to really have that support in their business and create wealth for themselves. And as you probably know, it's often an issue to do with receiving. It's often not just a strategical thing. So lots going on, but very much mission led. Have my next single out on the 14th of February. And I'm excited for the response. It's probably my biggest song yet. And you'll see why soon.
Oh, and I just love the title of it.
It's like,
The title,
yeah,
what's the worst that can happen? Oh my gosh,
yeah.
and everything you do, this is what this podcast is about. This is what my mission is about as well. I am so in tune with your message and what you do, and everything that you touch upon actually with that, and some of the things that, even in what you was just saying about the enoughness, the commitment, the connection, and the impact that you want to make, this is what season 2 of this podcast is going to be about, is really stepping into that side of it, stepping into coming back to ourselves, coming back to our pleasure, coming back to our joy, our passion, and following that. And actually, I love what you said there about death, because it's made me really reflect on a lot of what's gone on for me over the last, probably especially in the last 2 years. And I understand what you're saying about death. We've only got so long. Let's make the most of it. But I also see that during our life, we go through these massive stages of death and rebirths. And this is what I'm currently kind of going through, and what the women that that I'm supporting in my pleasure challenge, in my program Evolution, things like that, is about that death and rebirth, because that is our opportunity to do everything that you talk about. Your message is that. And I love the fact that you take it from that icon perspective. So tell me more about that. Tell me about icon. I want to know more. because you are an icon, 100%.
I love that you love that word as much as I do. So I think we go backwards before we go forward. So traditionally, we know what an icon is, whether it's the Queen of England, rest in peace, or whether it's David Bowie, Madonna. An icon is someone that's like recognizable and almost has a motif. Like you're like, oh, that hair is so iconic. Or Vivienne Westwood with the dresses. You see a Westwood dress, and you're like, oh my god, that's iconic. So there's something about being easily recognized. That's part of the icon, and obviously it's to do with fame, it's to do with status, and it's to do with that recognition. When we talk about icon in my world, my programs, my talks, even my social media posts, I'm talking about something a little different. I'm talking about the everyday icon, which makes me kind of want to cry even at this early stage in the podcast. Here we are, feeling emotional. And that is because a lot of people don't feel iconic. And that is, I'm talking about a fancy word for self-worth. But also people don't remember their power and they put it onto somebody else, whether it's Madonna or Billie Eilish, or I don't know, whoever you listen to, or whoever you look up to, whether it's a friend or whether it's a designer or whether it's a coach in your field that you've put on a pedestal. And all of that's well and good. We're human beings and we have hierarchy, and we, there's an element of that God stuff going on. But when it comes to you and your work and your journey, the key thing, and I teach this in 3 steps, is to understand that you're the one you've been waiting for. And when you connect to that, you're kind of not so much looking to the guy or the money or the wine or the Netflix to kind of fill you up or numb you out, but you actually just know that you're the source of your power. Now, it's easy for me to say these words. I'm sure people listening are like, oh my God, yes, come on. But it's actually the embodiment of that. That's your life's work. And, I teach mainly my programs around 6 months, and that's almost weekly. And, 6 months, they're going to get that quantum leap. But it's 6 months in their whole life. No, this is a living practice. I'm actually living it every day, where I forget my power. I forget that actually, if it doesn't bring me pleasure, I get to say no, or I get to choose otherwise. Now, when we go into sort of making decisions for your own joy and passion, those are your words, actually.
Yeah.
What then comes up for people in the Q&As with me and my work is, I couldn't possibly be selfish, Starling. That's selfish, that's self-centered, that's not a good girl. And whilst I understand that I was also brought up in London suburbs, British, be a good girl, don't think about, think about other people. Don't just think about you. The world doesn't revolve around you, Starling. Whilst I get that, is such a toxicity in that element of culture where people take it so far, so deep, so much that they forget themselves at all. And what I've learned the hard way is that when I'm the lighthouse, when I've, I don't know, had my breakfast this morning, I told you it was a bit of a kind of unusual morning, but when I've had a moment for myself, a quick journal, maybe a walk in the park, whatever the things are that I like to do, when I'm filled up, I can show up for my artists that I'm mentoring. I can show up for the songwriting session that I've got this afternoon around the next single I'm putting out. But when I'm not filled up, when I'm not the lighthouse, A, I can't show up for others, but B, and perhaps more importantly, the B to this A is that I am not able to really enjoy, because I'm putting the projects or the work or the money or whatever before my own well-being. And so self-care to me isn't like, oh, a bubble bath, or like, oh, it's a nice to have. It's imperative. And self-care for me is life design. So how we schedule our days, how we structure our lives, what we say no and yes, what our boundaries are, what we want to be known for. To me, that's when you're the lighthouse, is when you get as granular as, I just designed my kitchen. I don't like having pots in the sink, so I've got 2 dishwashers. Like, it's getting that granular about the fact that we've made space for 2 dishwashers. Like, that's not everyone's iconic dream, but for me, it's fantastic. It's about what you wear. It's in the granular, it's in the detail. And when we are that attuned to ourselves, and I'll talk to you about the steps in a minute, you really become unstoppable. And also people go, oh, hang on, can I have what Emma has or Starling has? And you're like, you can, but actually you can have your own version of that. And that's through really being connected to your heart and to what it is that lights you up. So the steps for me are self-curiosity. So getting really interested in what it is that you enjoy, what you don't, what feels right, what doesn't. But the second step is obviously self-connection, because you can't be curious and really inquisitive if you're not connected, if you've had too much coffee, if you've not eaten enough, if you've not had enough sleep. So it's like really making those decisions so that you enable that self-connection on a deeper level. I would love to drink coffee because I'm jet lagged all the time, but I know that it disconnects me from making great decisions. I know it disconnects me from my heart, so I don't do it. So self-curiosity, self-connection, we go a lot deeper in my workshops, but they're the first two steps. And of course, the third step is self-commitment. So committed that even though right now there's no evidence that you've got clients or that you're going to find the love of your life or whatever it is that one is looking for, you hold the vision and you take the steps, as well as just keeping it in your mind's eye. And self-commitment is such a big conversation because so many of us focus on what we don't want. And of course, we then get it. So the self-commitment is keeping in your mind's eye what you want your life to look like, what you want to be earning, what you want to be feeling, how you want to be doing it. Maybe you only do 3 Zooms a day. Maybe you don't work Fridays. Maybe you take a month off twice a year. You know, there's so many ways to do these things, but it's all about you. And there is not one blueprint. So self-commitment is after self-curiosity and self-connection.
My gosh, there is just so much wisdom in everything you're saying. And you know, you've probably seen, perhaps recently, I've got a massive thing out at the moment about the good girl vibe that triggers me hugely, because that is what I spent, like, I'm 40 this year, and I spent probably the first 38 years of my life being the good girl.
Good
I
girl.
did everything in the right fucking order, like
Yeah.
everything. I did it all in the right order. And what that led to was a mental breakdown that led to
Sure.
absolute fucking misery that ended up with me being in a relationship that wasn't right for me, in a career that did not fulfill me, that I actually disagreed with the core of it. And you just realize how deep this can take you down the rabbit hole. Like, when you don't address this, when you are not honoring yourself and you don't have that sense of self-worth, and you are so adhering to that being good, because it was drummed into us as kids, right? This message was drummed the hell in. You be good. You don't say anything to upset anybody else. You adjust yourself to please others, essentially.
Other people first.
Yeah, all the time. And this is the journey right now that I'm experiencing. This is what I'm supporting women with, because I understand the absolute need for this, you know. And I love the steps that you're talking about there: the self-curiosity, self-connection, and the self-commitment. And I think the commitment bit, that's a really hard bit to hold.
Oh yeah,
isn't it? Because
people just get tired and they go, oh, can I swear on your podcast? They just
yes,
go, fuck it, I'm going to take a job that gives me a salary, or fuck it, I'm going to marry him because he asked, or fuck it, I'm going. And it's so easy to sleep on yourself.
Yeah.
It's so easy to sleep on your life.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the good girl stuff, and I'm thinking about narcissistic parents now and everything, that to me is self-sacrifice. And that is the opposite of the icon in my opinion, in my research. And that's when you get people that are miserable and then they don't want the best for you. Or you've got Doris next door who says, oh, best not be a pop star. You know, who do you think you are? There's no money in that. All these limiting beliefs, these old paradigms, you know, whether it's about being an artist, whether it's about being a coach, or as you are, I believe, a leader in women's circles for change. Like, but you have to be the lighthouse, and that takes courage. Another of my favorite words, and I sort of used to have that on my Instagram bios, I'm a speaker in courage. I'm not entirely a sort of a Brené Brown in that, but courage, it has to be a part of the conversation. Because if you're not feeling that fear, it probably isn't part of your mission. And I always say that to my artists who are in the Icon music program, that isn't it weird, the thing that you want the most can be the thing that scares you the most. And I'm talking about performance, being on stage, being seen, being visible, being online, being loved by thousands. Isn't that weird that that can also give you the most anxiety? And so we are very complicated beings with a lot of polarization. Like, there's a part of me that really wants to be seen, there's another part of me that really doesn't, you know. That's very common in us as humans. But what we get to do is go, well, hang on, what's the part I want to listen to? What's the part I want to nourish in alignment with my vision, knowing I won't be here for very long? I might have another week, I might have another day, I might have another 33 years. I don't know, but living in that energy is like, it helps me take risks and be more courageous.
Yeah, I feel that so much. And the one thing that I've really realized about the good girl thing is that no matter how good we are, we're never actually going to please those people anyway. You know, being, you know, you said about narcissistic, and being in that a lot in my life, you know, in relationship or in, you know, parent, all of that, you know, it's just, I really understand that no matter what you do, you're never going to please them anyway. So you need to do the thing that you need to do for you, and taking that into account. But I think
Yeah.
it is so hard, because I think my belief is that actually what's meant for me, I can't even imagine it. I've not experienced it, so I can't imagine it. And therefore that commitment bit can be very sticky sometimes. Like, it can be hard to hold on to when you think, okay, but there are things in this world, because our imagination is so limited by what we've already experienced. We can
Literally.
imagine things that we've experienced a version of already. And therefore, actually, if you've spent your life people pleasing and getting the message that you are not enough
Yes.
throughout your life,
Yes.
then how do you then take that step to, that's it's like a leap of faith, isn't it? And it is courage. It is so ingrained in courage.
Mm.
I,
That's why you
I
need your people, Emma. Sorry to cut you, but
yes.
like whether it's your group or whether it's your Instagram that they need to follow,
Mm,
whether it's my talk, like that's why you need to find your people that are about your vibe. It's a thing in one of my, this is an online talk actually, it's more of a masterclass to sell the icon. I talk about who to listen to, and I talk about like not listening to the neighbor or the granny that actually never had her dreams come true, because she's probably not going to be courageous or want the best for you. Talk to someone like me or you who's going to be like, yes and yes. But back to our conversation about this good girl piece, I think what was really useful for the listeners to hear is this. Ultimately, what we're talking about is authenticity versus attachment. Because of
mm,
course we became people pleasers to get love. Like, it sounds like we're so selfless and all of that. No, it's a survival technique. I needed
yeah.
to do that because I was not in a particularly safe environment, surrounded by addicts and mental health and all sorts. I had a lot of PTSD, which led to why I had so much low self-worth, hence now wanting to be a teacher and high self-worth. And what we're talking about is how painful and difficult, and you know this if you've drawn boundaries, which I'm sure you're probably a boundary queen, is the parts of you that, and you have to honor them, that say, I can't do that, I'll lose him or I'll lose her, or I won't be liked, or I'll be judged. I'll be judged for being too expensive. I'll be judged for being selfish. God, the pain of being told I was selfish by one of my aunties 3 years ago. It took me a good month to recover. And I was like,
Mm,
what? Starling, come on. You know this stuff. But I had to be with that wound because it hit something that was young. It wasn't a 30-year-old. It was a young girl needing love. And self-sacrifice was the only option for me. So
yeah.
anyway, what happens, we grow up, right? We become adults. But what's really interesting, and Gabor Mate is really the expert in this, massive fan of Gabor Mate. We should put him in the notes maybe, because people should
Yes.
research,
Yeah.
is what happens is your survival techniques for getting through your childhood, so let's say it's people pleasing or perfectionism, they actually become the opposite of the success techniques that you need as an adult.
Mm,
So what worked for you then doesn't work for you now. And that's where the updating of the mind needs to come. I'm trained in this thing called part work, IFS. So I do that with my artists and my clients. But that's where that needs to come in, is actually what worked for you then, or what worked for me then is not the thing that's going to bring you to, international recognition as a leader for women, or whatever we want to be.
mm,
But we had to do what we had to do as kids to survive that environment. And one of the biggest topics of conversation, which I find fascinating, is not so much what I teach on, is around identity. So who are we beyond who we had to become? And who we are beyond who we had to become is incredibly different to who we think we are in our type personality that we identify with the world. Often it's very different. To give you an example, I've become quite a work addict until recent years, and that was the way I survived childhood, was cooking, cleaning, being a good
yes.
girl domestically. And
Feel
then I
that.
became head girl, and then I became A star, and this kind of a vibe, and then wondered why I was burning out. But actually what's really interesting is if you ask some of the parts of me in a kind of a softer, slower space, it'd probably be like, I'd rather work less, I'd rather do less, and yet my identity is, oh God, if you ask Starling to do something, she'll do it immediately. Like, is efficiency and reliability. And whilst I am that, what's really interesting is the smaller, younger parts who don't get as much time, in my psyche, or much airtime, are saying, hey, what about going to the park for a picnic?
Yes.
just taking it easy. So yeah, what I had to become, it helped me survive. But what's gone on as an adult is me unpicking that part of who I had to become then, and
Yeah.
who am I now? What do I get to be now I'm safe?
Yeah. Do you know, I've shared so much about this, about the unlearning. It's like when it, when all of this huge transition for me began, it was like I took my whole life, threw it up in the air and picked out the bits that I wanted and had to unlearn and let go of everything else. And it is an incredibly difficult process. So I'm in the middle of my somatic ICF certification for trauma informed, to be a trauma informed coach. And I'm learning all about this and the way the brain works. So I really understand. And I think what's really important is that there isn't an end goal with this. People think, oh, I'll do the work and then I'm healed. And what I'm realizing as I'm doing this is that the more that I do, the more it's like the further back you go. And it's healing, and it's going to keep coming up, and you're going to think you're healed in one area. And actually, this happened to me literally this weekend. I thought I was healed in an area. Something unexpected happened, and I was like, holy shit, I'm not healed. I'm not healed.
It's so relatable.
Because what it is, and this is what I'm learning about our brain, is like, Caroline Strawson, she's the one that's training me. She's absolutely amazing. She knows her shit. Like she knows this stuff inside out. And she talks about the brain. You've got the prefrontal cortex, you've got your limbic. And basically, when you're here and now, you're thinking logically and you're seeing everything as it is. And you can do all of this amazing stuff that we're talking about. When you flip your lid and something triggers you, you are no longer controlled by that part of the brain. You're controlled by this limbic. The cortisol's released, and it's basically your emotional memory. So you're not taking what's happened as it's happened. You're taking of, when I was 5, this happened to me and I felt like this, and it just, that's what triggers you, and you go back to that feeling. You're no longer in the present, and until you can come back to the present, until you can bring yourself back, and this is what I'm learning at the moment, is about using the body, bringing ourselves back so that we can hold that vision, so that we can maintain that commitment to actually where we want to be. And I think what I've realized is I need to train myself to do this. And even like you just said, I am a massive perfectionist, overworker, recovering perfectionist, overworker. I'm in recovery. But I know that I need to train myself to do that. And that's what my work is all about, I use pleasure as the path to do that,
Beautiful.
and train myself again to think, like you just said about, oh, I'd love to like go for a picnic, and train myself to actually act on some of those things. And to, I'm very heavy on productivity. If it's not productive, then it's not worth doing. That was my mindset. And this is what I'm trying to train myself out of now. So actually, let's do this thing over here that is for nothing, no reason apart from me enjoying doing it. And it takes such commitment to yourself, and it takes understanding yourself and valuing yourself, and all things that I think we have, all of that just got trained out of us, and it gets trained out of us by the people that are around us, by the society. You are very fortunate if you have lived a life where that's not been trained out of you. I think it was quite a cultural thing, particularly through the 80s, 90s, it was very, that, actually going back further than that, I'm thinking about parents and, what they went through. This is generational. This has been passed on. So it's getting better now.
Yeah.
But we have to work on this. And what my inspiration is, I've got 3 kids. I look at particularly my daughter, who's 10 now, and I don't want her to be doing this kind of work when she's older. So I'm actively trying to do this kind of work with her now, so that she can step into all the things that you just so beautifully talk about. And I love what you're saying about the icon. And there's something actually that I saw that you talked about, and about operating from inevitability. And
my favorite topic.
yes, I just thought that was just so juicy. It's like,
I'd
that.
love to talk about it. Do you mind if I just comment on the parenting thing though? Because I find this very emotional, and like, I knew you had kids. I didn't know you had 3. You are exceptional. I have 3 bunny rabbits, and they live in the bathroom, and that's plenty work. That's like 3 human beings. I'm like,
3 human beings.
You are quite extraordinary on top of everything else you do. There's something in that though that, it does make me very emotional around when parents model that life can be fun, and that it's safe to feel joy, and that you get to have more than enough money, or more than enough like playtime, or whatever, picnics, whatever it is. that's changing. That's literally a generational shift. Like, I don't even have the word
Mm,
for it. It's so massive and it's so emotional.
yes.
And the fact that you're doing the work, it's like, there's this phrase I used to always say about the kind of abuse and trauma in my family. I said, the buck stops with me, which is
Yes.
potentially why I maybe would like a kid. I mean, I'd like a kid for other reasons, but potentially just be like, even if I just have time for one, because I'm trying to tour the world in Lycra first. So
Yes.
it's the
Own that
Lycra.
first.
There is the Lycra vision. You got it. Yeah. But then for her or him or whoever it is, that they get to experience what you're sharing. And I really think that's amazing. So I just want to say thank you. And before we get on to inevitability, there's a sadness for me in overworking. So I notice I'll wake up
Mm,
and I feel a sadness. And my work addiction really amped up in 2020 when my American tour got cancelled and I was online on Zoom, actually. And I managed to make a 6-figure business in 9 months, which was amazing. I
wow.
joined that Susie Ashworth program. I was always a music mentor, but I hadn't really, taken it to that next level. So on one hand, I was really seeing the results, but on another hand, I noticed that it kind of kicked into this compulsion of like not taking breaks. And so
Mm,
the reason I'm sharing sort of so much around that is, without stating the obvious too much, it's definitely worth for anyone listening to really, this is what I mean about curiosity, really get interested in the feelings. So it's not like, oh, it's my depression, let's get rid of it and, take some pills or
mm,
have a glass of wine. It's like, oh, no, there's this message coming through. The way I love what I do, but the way I was doing it, that's not working. I love what I do, but the way I'm doing it is something that I've just been shifting in the last 6 months. So, our emotions can be these communicators. It
yes.
sounds so obvious, but it's
Mm,
it's just worth mentioning again that when we are feeling like myself, this sadness, okay, what is it that I get to change? If I'm committed to the vision of joy, if I'm committed to my passion, if I'm committed to my creativity, what is it that isn't bringing me that? Like, what is it that
yes.
gets to shift? So moving on to inevitability, if it's inevitable that, I don't know, say you want to be a pop star or you want to sell out the O2 with your amazing podcast, if that's inevitable, what's the inevitability action? And that's what Abraham Hicks is sort of referring to with aligned
Mm,
action, rather than going from desperation or I'll grab this or need or scarcity or oh, I might as well discount this or I might as well take that opportunity. It's actually about going, no, because I know this is inevitable. This end goal is inevitable. What I get to do is A, my shoulders drop. I always notice that. And B, I
yes.
get to be a bit more discerning and picky. And then C, the decisions I do make, the energy, the emails, the outreach, the whatever I do comes from that place of worthiness, which is again the icon energy.
Yes. Oh, I'm just going to sit with that for a minute because that is so true. And the one thing that came to mind, being somebody that has worked from a place of scarcity, of survival mode, there has been genuine fear in my life for myself. And having experienced that, I understand how difficult it is to think things can be better. And the thing that I want to say about that, particularly if you're somebody that perhaps is around narcissism, that perhaps is actually in genuine fear and is not safe, then what you get to do in that moment is to be able to do this and to be able to get to this point where you can hold a vision, create a vision, and come from it with the thought pattern of inevitability, is to make yourself feel safe in yourself. Because I know and I fully understand that you cannot always change your environment. So, what I found really, really supported me in that time was to find ways of making myself safe in me. So it might be that there was places there where I could go where I felt safe. It was so much about the community. Like if I hadn't have been working with my coach and I had my community and my network of good close friends that I could trust, I would not have survived it. I would have sunk. So it's about creating a sense of safety within yourself, so that even if your circumstances can't change in that moment, you then get to feel safe within you, within your body. And that comes back to the body practices that I'm teaching in my program and things like that. It's about the somatics of it. It's about bringing it back into your body, getting yourself to feel safe. Like you said, when you just said about as soon as you get to that point, your shoulders drop. It's like, it's like that release. And actually, even if, you know, say you can't have that kind of separate environment or anything like that, and just coming back into your breath using practices like meditation, or actually I find meditation particularly difficult, and that's why I resonate with what you do in your songs. I always have to use music or guided meditation or something like that. There are so many ways now that we can make ourselves feel safe in our own body. And a big thing for me, when I had to leave my home because it was no longer safe, the shift for me was, I am home. Wherever I am home. And that changed everything for me, like everything. It meant that I was able to then start to build my life again. And I think it's when you can get that grounded safety in your own body and within yourself, that's when you can then start making these leaps and holding that vision and connecting to yourself and all of the good stuff that just makes you want to smile and get excited. And I think, you know, something else that I've seen that you've said is about falling in love with the self-doubt parts. And I understand how hard that is, but I think, you know, my understanding of it is those self-doubts, our fears, our things that are there, that are, you know, we battle against, they're there to keep us safe. So it's almost like, you know, an exercise that I've used, and actually this is from Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic, is she writes a letter to fear. But first, what she allows herself to do is she sits down and says, for example, if this was for me, "Dear Emma, this is your fear and this is what I want to tell you." And it feels so big and so scary at first. But when you let yourself do that, you realize that actually the fears are way smaller than they feel in your body. And having that kind of release and getting that out of your body, you get to say, "Oh, well, okay." And then you get to reply, "Thank you, that, you know, dear fear, thank you so much for keeping me safe. But this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. I want you to be there with me, but I'm gonna do it anyway." And I think a lot of what you talk about is the understanding that fear is gonna be there. You know,
Yeah.
all of this is gonna be there still, but we get to do it anyway. And I think this is what a lot of people get stuck on. They forget that, okay, oh God, I'm scared. That's it. That means I can't do it.
Yeah.
Actually, we get to be scared and we get to do it anyway. And that to me is courage. That 100% is courage. Doing it
100%.
anyway.
And oh, I love what you're sharing. There's so much in that. And this whole thing, okay, it's a myth. It's a myth that because I have, I don't know, 30,000 people watching me on stage, that I'm not nervous, or because, I don't know, I keep talking about Madonna, but let's say Madonna has millions of followers, that she's not going to be scared. Like, it's a total myth that
Mm,
fear isn't part of your experience. And people, that's why people need to read like biographies, autobiographies, is people
yeah.
need to kind of be around people that support them, but also people that normalize fear. The fact that it is so scary to do these things, but yet in a way that is part of your calling. There's a famous phrase that says, "Run towards the sound of gunfire." And when I heard
Mm,
somebody say, "Run towards the sound of gunfire," to me, this is honestly like 10 years ago, when I was kind of just interested in, I had a very odd start to music because I was always told I couldn't sing. But I said, oh, I'd love to do it. And yet I feel nervous. I feel that I would sing out of tune and my face would go red and I would blush and I would sound shit. And they said to me, is a really lovely guy, actually. He's one of the guys behind QI, that program.
mm,
And he said, "You got to run towards the sound of gunfire, Starling." And I never really got it. But years later, I was like, oh, so the thing that scares me probably is my nemesis,
mm,
but is probably the thing that is what's going to teach me the most. So for instance, I find presenting, I find talking, coaching very easy. I love it. It's still part of my mission. But if you ask me how I feel about performing my songs on stage, there's still a lot of vulnerability and fear around tuning and presentation and movement and all of those things. But that's not a negative. It just shows there's room for growth. And so
mm.
for me, I'm actually always curious to know, what's the thing that's really going to ship me up? Because the stuff that's going to ship me up is probably the stuff that is my next calling, like this book I'm writing and stuff. So that's what we get to do, is normalize that is actually really healthy and normal. But if you didn't have it, it probably isn't going to turn you on. That's what's so weird.
Yes.
If it was
Yes.
easy and you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to open a bakery, yeah, I don't feel that nervous. It's like, but is that really your mission
Yeah.
then if you don't really feel like you're going to shit yourself? So yeah, and this whole thing about wealth, if I may, around what you were sharing around, not feeling safe. I've been there I live in a massive house now in Kent, but 6 years ago I didn't have hot water or heating, and I lived in a squat with 26 artists. And when I say I had nothing, I mean like I didn't even have £12 left of the overdraft.
Yeah.
Like when you've used the overdraft and then you're
Yeah,
like, oh,
I've been there.
there's
Yeah.
not even any, oh right, okay, there's not even
Yeah.
any part of the borrowing that I can't even
Yes.
borrow.
Yes. Yeah. I have been
So
there actually many times in my life. I know that fear, that
yeah. So
feeling.
there really is nothing, right? So there's a couple of things, and I didn't really know about this because I was just so traumatized, bless me, in my 20s. Sorry, my desk is squeaking, so I hope it's not coming through on this. So in my 20s, I just didn't really get that basically it was my mother's fears. It was the house I grew up in. It was the scarcity and stories they told. And this is what I teach in my wealth program. But the other thing I didn't know is I could make myself feel safe, like you're saying, just by tapping my fingertips. So I then got into EFT and all that, training, but just like, okay, I don't feel safe around money right now. And I've got no more money available to me. Keep tapping. I still love and accept myself. Keep tapping. And you'll start to notice that the limbic, all the stuff you were talking about at the beginning regarding your trauma responses, when we're triggered, like say you're at a party and someone does something weird or says something, you've left your body. You're not even in that room anymore.
Yeah,
and it's the same with money. If someone hasn't paid me, this happened actually a lot in January, and I found it quite triggering. There was a lot of like bouncing and stuff like that. I've still got a massive team to pay. So when you get triggered, or you're like, oh, where's the money, or it hasn't come through, or say you were hoping to get a client and you didn't, like, the just real stuff about being an entrepreneur, it is real, it is triggering. There's two things. One of them is I find business is healing. So it shows me where there's more room for growth. And for me, there is always more room for growth in my money story. Secondly, it shows me where I put the idea that I'm unsafe on. And often my history is putting the lack of safety on finances, when actually, as you said, we are our own home. I am my own home. It doesn't matter whether I've got £12 or £12,000 or £12 million. It's being access to that. So when the thought comes, these are a couple of my tips that I then do deeper in my program. When the thought comes, you can tap and remind yourself you're safe, but you can also tap and remind yourself, allow the visitor. So it's probably a younger part of you who doesn't realize you're capable of making loads of money. But you get to remind that part is probably 12 or whatever, mine's 12. And you go, hey, I'm 33 now, or whatever age, hey, I'm 43, whatever. And you get to let that part know, I get you're scared. Let me breathe with you. Let me be with you. And the visitor passes, but only if you make it a cup of tea. So that's how you do it. You just get really like, oh, okay, wow, I've just suddenly got triggered because I checked my account or whatever it might be. So you get to just breathe and go, oh, okay, right, you're the visitor. How can I be there for you? And I'm so scared. What would I've got people to feed, whatever it is. I get that. And then when you've had that walk or tapping or whatever it is you want to do to calm yourself, that's when you can take the action and get into inevitability, but not when you're triggered. Yeah. The inevitability thought won't help anyone who's triggered because you're not here. And this idea of meditating when you feel triggered is fucking mental.
Yeah, I know.
How can you meditate when you feel
in your
scared?
own mind when you're feeling that? It's just gonna
absolutely mental. I'm like, that's the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. So yeah, meditate when you feel like amazing and you feel glorious.
Yes.
Meditate, but don't meditate when you're triggered. Like,
no.
I didn't meditate
You
when
will
all those
sink.
payments found. No, I was tapping and I was like, oh, I'm noticing there's a visitor.
And this is why, like, coming back into the body, I often do this, or
that's
shaking
me.
out the energy,
we're just tapping.
The physical movement, actually. And it's quite interesting. During this training, we've been watching a lot of animals and their automatic reaction when that limbic nerve is being activated, shaking. When the cortisol, they have to shake it out their body. So do something physical, get it out of your body. And I love what you said about inviting it there, because I think this is the issue with the way a lot of people deal with it, is they try and push it away. And actually the best way to deal with this is to bring it in, is to be there with it, is to actually allow yourself to feel it. And it's never as bad, or it never lasts as long as what you're imagining it will. It's like you imagine that
it will last long if we push it away.
Pushing it away. Exactly.
I found that with depression as well. When I was really depressed, I would just try and ignore and crack on. And actually it lasted a lot longer when I invited the darkness in and I was like, okay, take me over, thinking I'm going to fucking die. It literally was gone within 8 hours or whatever it was, rather than 8 days.
Yeah, do you know what? That's the funny thing. When I was younger, I was on antidepressants for a year, and there was one morning where I woke up and I said, this can't happen anymore. I let myself feel it all, and that was it. It it stopped. It was so bizarre,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
like, I know there's a degree of you have to be ready in yourself, and you have to be, because I think that being ready is just being willing to actually feel it. And it is scary. And yes, you
100%.
do feel like you're going to die. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat this in any way. It feels fucking awful, but it passes so much quicker. And that's the thing, is it does pass. That feeling cannot last. And can I just say, like, you are just such an inspiration. You are a total icon yourself. And you have,
Thank you.
like, when you're just talking about, I'm just touring the world, and, I, I'm a pop artist and I'm performing to 30,000 people on stage. Like, look at the life you have built. That is just fucking amazing. And, you've really taken turning your dream into real life. And I honestly cannot understand how anybody ever told you you can't sing. Like, what the hell?
Mm.
That just shows how wrong people's perceptions actually are, because you're
And how easily we
amazing.
believe them. That's
Yes,
the danger.
that could have stopped you. Like,
Yeah,
that
well,
could
it
have
did.
just,
It stopped me for 25 years. No, I'm late.
oh,
I'm late to get into the pop scene, man. And they always say, "Oh, lie about your age." I'm late into the scene because A, I had a lot of PTSD, but B, I was told a lie and I believed it. So this is
yeah.
the thing, we have to be careful who we listen to. We really, really do.
Mm,
It's a big one, but also to listen to ourselves, our emotions. Life isn't trying to perpetually fuck us. Our emotions are here to teach us and say, hey, by the
yes.
way, something's up. If you're feeling depressed, what is it? Is it your environment that needs to change? Is it a relationship that you want to leave? Like, is it
Mm,
around money and learning how to acquire more? Like, what's the problem? I think that's where I've always been committed, is when there's a problem, I've been very committed to solving it. I don't know. I was very young when I
yes.
started to realize, why is my mum miserable? Why is my dad? Like, I just was young when I thought, I didn't always have the answers, but I thought, does life have to be, is life meant to be that dark and sad?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it? I don't, I
Mm.
just, even as a 7-year-old, I thought, I don't think it is.
No, it's not. And that's the thing, it's coming back to your own intuition. And I think this is the
Mm,
problem. Our fear screams at us really loudly. Our intuition is just this quiet whisper. And until
yeah.
you actually get to and learn to come back to self and actually tune in, and that's by allowing feelings, that's by allowing yourself to feel it, all of that, tune in, that you can actually hear your intuition, and that's your true guidance, because it is so powerful when we actually hear it and we follow our own intuition. It's a game changer.
Mhm.
It's real,
Yeah,
it's a
and
real game
again, though,
changer.
I'd say, because I was so traumatized, I didn't have intuition. I mean, I did,
Mm,
but it was so quiet. That's where I come back to the self-commitment, self-curiosity, and
yes.
self-connection. Because if you're not connected, because I don't know, you turn to drink or smoke or whatever so much, that you lose, or if you don't take care of yourself, you lose that connection, and therefore
Yes.
the intuition is quiet. It's why I quit, like, even drinking. I don't think I've done that in about 4 years, because it doesn't keep me here,
Yeah.
with my body and what my body is trying to tell me all the time. Yeah.
Mm. And I love,
Yeah. So much to say on this.
there is, isn't there? Oh, we could just go on
We
and
could have
on. I
an
feel
hour.
like we should just do like a series of things.
Come
There's
on, let's
just so
partner.
much in this, isn't there? It's just amazing. Oh, and it's just been an absolute joy to speak to you today. And I know that you have a busy day, and I know that you're off to a recording studio and all of that, so I
Yeah.
won't keep you any longer. But I just wanted to say, Starling, you have been an absolute joy. We need to do this again. I feel like there's so much more that we need to unpack with this, and watching your journey, everything you're doing, that in itself is such an inspiration. And I think when you are struggling to find your own vision, when you are struggling to kind of follow the inevitability, having someone like you that you follow, that you work with, that you're around, is actually sometimes the lift you need. It's like you're the wings for other people, you know what I mean? You're bringing them up. And they say that you're the average of the 5 people you spend time with. So actually, the thing that I want to kind of leave with is actually think about that. That's something you can really do something about quite easily. Think
Mm,
about the 5 people, you are one of those 5, the people that you are around, and are they doing this for you? And if they're not, then you need to put people in place that are going to lift you. And that is where, the program that I offer, Evolution, the program that you offer, actually the several programs that you offer, actually, but Icon being one of the main ones, is, that's what we're doing this for, isn't it? It's to lift people with us, and to bring them up to this, because honestly, if I can support women and know that it's having an impact on their life, I know it's going to have an impact on their kids or their future kids' life, and it's going to be that generational shift. That to me is everything. Absolutely everything.
100%. 100%. We get to show people what's possible, and people need to have a light to go, oh, can it be like that? And when you
Mm,
have a light, or you have a role model, or you have somebody that kind of symbolizes what it is that you desire for yourself, it becomes easier, because you go, oh, there's proof it's possible. And if we're proof it's possible, it makes everybody else go, actually, I can probably elevate my vision just a tad higher.
yes, seeing the evidence, and the evidence doesn't have to be from you. It gets to be from whoever you choose as your mentors, your coaches, your guides.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
oh, Starling, what an absolute pleasure. Can you just remind everybody where they can find you and or how they can work with you?
for sure.
Because I'm sure so many people are going to want to follow you.
Oh, thank you so much. So my Instagram is Starling's World, Starlings World, and my website, which is a little bit about the wealth program and icon, and also you can work with me one to one. Although there's a bit of a wait list on that. That's called jointheplatform.com, JOIN theplatform.com, and there isn't an Instagram with that. That's just a website. And then yeah, my music will come out shortly. Then I'll tour some parts of America shortly. And then I have my live event in April 28th in Soho in London. And there's still, I think, 40% of tickets left. So there's still a chance to get that.
Amazing. That is
Yeah.
so excited. Yeah, that
Yeah.
28th of April you said that was, wasn't
28th
it?
of April.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
There's
actually
a pre-sale, I think, at the moment.
yeah. So anybody that's listening right here and now, the 14th of Feb, what's the worst that can happen? New single coming out, but anybody in future, go back, listen to it. She's just amazing. So thank you so much, Starlin. What an absolute joy it's been to speak with you this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, take care.